Good Wednesday afternoon to you. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. Training camp out in Berea is underway. No fans today or tomorrow. They'll be allowed in there Friday. We will have plenty on Browns training camp a little later in the show. Kevan Arnold will join us to talk about Browns training camp. We begin by talking Browns, and let's listen in to Kevin Stefanski, kind of setting the scene for training camp, talking about Super Bowl and how there has been plenty of Super Bowl talk with the Browns.
We talk about a lot of things. Scott, I promise you all 32 clubs talk about the Super Bowl. It's really easy to talk about it. It's hard to do. So we're just going to focus on the work.
Did you bring up the Kansas City loss? Playoff loss?
We've talked about a lot of things over time, but I'd say we're moving on to 2021.
And we are moving on to 2021. Let's welcome in Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Mac, the message was pretty clear. Super Bowl's okay, we got to work, and it's 2021.
You know, Dave, and this is what I appreciate about Kevin Stefanski is it's almost Bill Belichickian where, we're on to the next week. Now we're on to the new season. And while the Browns did have a lot of success last year, he's looking to build upon that and basically looking at this as a completely clean slate, good and bad. So, you can go ahead and put a lot of those things behind you. At least you had some of those first-year struggles early on, without that training camp, without that offseason. Now you have that underneath your belt with this team. And honestly, I really am excited and encouraged by the fact that, Kevin Stefanski and this team, they're taking that next week approach and just completely turning the page and not even necessarily focusing on the Super Bowl aspirations because, like he said, every team has those Super Bowl aspirations. So, I look at what Stefanski has done and the way that this culture and this team as a whole has really bought in, and I absolutely love it from Kevin Stefanski.
So we made a lot of the Odell Beckham Jr. being able to practice and Grant Delpit and guys coming back for injuries. There are 3 guys that were unable to go in that first practice. We knew Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, COVID restricted list. He's unable to go. Tony Fields hurt the other foot, not the foot that kept him out of some of rookie minicamp, but the other foot. So Tony Fields, linebacker, unable to go. Dearness Johnson excused for personal reasons. Those 3 not on the field day 1 of training camp. But you look at it, and 2 of the young linebackers, and again, it's way too early to get concerned, but you kind of raise your eyebrow and look and say, those young guys need to be on the field practicing.
Yeah, and especially, JOK, he's going to be out for that first week and a half, it seems like. So, that's valuable time that he's going to be missing and, at least getting used to, at least coexisting with some of these guys on the defensive side. Now, Tony Fields is one where I'm a little apprehensive and I'm a little worried for him because of the fact that, he's fighting for that roster spot. Now, he's a good special teamer. Obviously playing at West Virginia, he's somebody who thrives on, playing every single down, including those special teams roles. And so, especially in a competitive linebacker room where that back half of that linebacker room is really going to be interesting to see how it plays out. You have Mack Wilson, who's going to be competing for one of those spots. You have Sione Takitaki, a 3rd-round pick just a couple of years ago. He's fighting for one of those spots as well. And, now you add in Tony Fields, who's somebody who can play a lot all over the field. And for him, missing out on this time early on, and especially like you said, not the foot that he originally injured, the other foot that he didn't have previously injured. Now at this point, that's valuable time that he's losing, and at that point, that's a step up for Mack Wilson. That's a step up for Takitaki and those guys as well to possibly get ahead in that linebacking competition.
Yeah, without question. So before practice, a couple of Browns met with the media. Jarvis Landry talked about his kind of mindset and his approach to training camp this year.
Yeah, I think everybody's excited. Everybody's happy to be back. So, it's good to be back on the grass with the guys.
How about Odell passing his physical so he could be out here? He talked about how excited he is to see you and the rest of the guys.
Yeah, and we're grateful to have him out here and to see him running around and moving around and stuff like that. We look forward to having him back.
What has the message been to you guys from Coach Stefanski about kind of the hype, all of that stuff around this team?
The message has been pretty simple. It's the same one that has been since the first day he got here. The work. It's in the work. What we do is in the work. And that's the same thing he's been, telling us in every team meeting, all around the building. Every sign that we see, that's one of the words that's on there.
And again, Mac, Kevin Stefanski is consistent by design and with that, and I think that's one of the things that the players like about him. He's the same guy every day, and work usually is coming out of his mouth every day.
Yeah, it's basically just like on rinse repeat, basically, when it comes to him. And, honestly, it comes off, and it comes off with the players buying in. A lot of this time last year, we weren't necessarily sure what we were going to get from Stefanski and with the rest of the roster at that point, too. But now you kind of see that that's settled in. And like what Jarvis was saying, it's about the work. And, especially getting Odell back this year, that's huge for them. And on top of that, too, being able to see what they can do and go from there and just building upon, that work that they put in last year and now being able to expand that even more and getting back in Odell Beckham. By the end of last year, you didn't have Odell, obviously, for that back half of the year when all of a sudden everybody was seeming to get used to the offense. Now at this point, you have Odell, you have him coming into the offense. He's getting adjusted with everybody. And so once that happens, all of a sudden then you can expand upon this offense. You don't necessarily need to get into some of the basic concepts. Now you can expand, get into some of the more advanced topics, advanced, ideas when it comes to this offense. And so I'm interested to see what Kevin Stefanski and company do with this offense and with this group as a whole to see what they can go ahead and do, what they pull out of their hat at this point. Because I feel like while last year was phenomenal, I think that they can also advance and take that next step here in 2021.
Yeah, and so the Browns have Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, two veteran wide receivers who know all the tricks. And a guy who's most excited about that is Greg Newsome, the first-round pick who is fighting to win that starting spot opposite Denzel Ward. He's excited to see what he can learn from going against two veteran wide receivers every day in training camp.
I mean, those are arguably two of the, best receivers in the whole entire NFL. So playing against them and practicing against them each week would definitely prepare me for whoever, I have to guard, going into the upcoming game week. So it would definitely be great practicing against those guys.
You're getting yourself ready to play, obviously. Put yourself in a competition for a starting job during this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Nothing is given. Everything is earned. I mean, at this point, I'm trying to learn from some of those older guys like Greedy and Denzel and Troy and just learn the coverages, like I said, and just go out there and try to compete as best as I can. And, whatever coach needs me to do, that's what I'm going to have to do. No, I think, competition is competition. Coming to a team like this that's, in win-now mode and, has a great room that I'm going to be a part of is just going to, boost everyone's ability. So competition is going to be great in that room.
And Mac, I like the fact that he knows he has to earn it. He's talking about competition, and he sees the Browns in win-now mode. So those are some things to kind of think about from your first-round pick, who you took, with your first pick in the draft.
Yeah, and I love the competitive fire where, a lot of times, like certain players, they might necessarily back down a little bit when they're dealing with some of these other players who might come in and think that, this is my job. I'm the first round pick. I should be playing from day one. Whereas the approach that you're seeing out of Newsome is, look, as the adage goes, iron sharpens iron. So, seeing that competition, him going against Greedy, another talented player, second round pick just 2 years ago, I look at Newsome and I think that this is just a phenomenal situation for him as a whole, because not only does he get a chance to learn under guys like Denzel Ward, Troy Hill, and even the safeties as well, John Johnson and those guys as well. On top of that, too, he also gets to cover these guys like a Jarvis Landry, like an Odell Beckham, where he can go ahead, cover them in the slot, cover them outside. He can go ahead and do that and learn each and every day. And that's going to go a long way when dealing with other guys, when he's going up against a Tyreek Hill or going up against some of these other guys, across the league when it comes to these wide receivers that he's going to have to cover. I mean, hell, he's going to have to cover Devontae Adams by the end of the year. So, with the way that he's going to be able to cover these guys, in training camp, day in, day out, that's just going to do nothing but help him in the long run.
Yeah, and the other thing is his approach. I'm sure the veterans love to hear a young guy who was drafted that highly who says, yeah, I got to come in and earn it. So very mature, and keep in mind, a young guy, first-round player in Greg Newsome. All right, Myles Garrett, and this is an interesting perspective on this. He was asked the difference between this year, 2021, when expectations are so high, and when they were so high in 2019 under Freddie Kitchens?
There's no difference. On paper we look great, but that's just it. It's on paper. And we got to go out here, got to put the work in. We got to grind. We got to make sure that chemistry is there for when we match up with the Chiefs first week. So, it all looks good, but we gotta make it great out here day by day.
Is the message from Coach Stefanski different than it was from Freddie Kitchens 2 years ago?
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead. What did he say? What did Stefanski say?
About expectations? I mean, we got expectations just like everybody else. Everybody goes into the season wanting to win every game they play. Everybody goes into the season wanting to win a chip. That's everybody's expectation of themselves. What you do day by day from training camp to the last day of the regular season is what defines you. So we're just going to work every day as if it's our last, and how the chips fall as they may.
Just a little difference between Coach Stefanski and Coach Kitchen, just a little bit. But again, you don't have to have the players tell you what the messaging is because you can hear it in their answers to the questions.
Yeah, and that's just the night and day difference between Coach Kitchens and Coach Stefanski. Stefanski, he's really taken that, like what Jarvis said, it's that work approach. He says it day in and day out. And, Dave, I know you and I get tired of the repetitive answer of just hearing the work. But honestly, it's really welcome, honestly. With the way that he's handled it and the way that, Miles talked about it, it's a stark difference because I still remember back when, they initially traded for Odell and, Myles Garrett's talking about, coming out, possibly winning the division, night one before they even hit the practice field. So, comparatively, like you said, just being about the work and coming in and doing the little things and it's all on paper. I listened to that from Miles and it's a night and day difference for me, with the way that this team has handled themselves. It's not necessarily that the expectations have changed, but it's the way that they've handled themselves that has really changed in these past 2 years, and why I'm thoroughly excited for what they do this year and thoroughly more impressed with the way that they've been able to handle the pressure going into this season.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan, and I get to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear a national pundit who thinks the Browns have the best pass rushing duo. That's straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. Browns out on the field in Berea, kind of wrapping up the first day of training camp. Fans will be allowed there on Friday, so you have 2 days, today and tomorrow, with no fans. Closed practices, still out on the field practicing. Not in any pads or anything. That's not allowed until next week. But the fans will be allowed in there on Friday. And some word coming out of Berea that is a little bit concerning. Greedy Williams left the field with a trainer, and this is from Nate Ulrich, really good Browns beat reporter for the Akron Beacon Journal. Walked off the practice field into the building with an athletic trainer. That is all we know. We don't know the status of that, but Mac, when you hear Greedy with that shoulder injury that was that kept him out all last year, and you hear that he leaves the field, it's obviously reason for concern, and that's something that we'll monitor as we get going in training camp.
Yeah, and especially for somebody who dealt with injuries going into his rookie season as well. He has a past when it comes to his history or to his injury history as well. I look at Greedy Williams, and obviously he's fighting for a starting job this year. We just heard from, Greg Newsome, first-round pick from this past year too. Those two are going to be in a heated battle. On top of that, you still have Troy Hill, who's in the slot, who can play outside as well. I think it's really a shame, especially because Greedy Williams, I was excited to see what he was able to bring because, again, he has those ball skills that you loved out of LSU. You saw a little bit in his rookie year, and I wanted to see how he was able to kind of take that next step this year. But, again, with first day, ending up having to walk off, with the injury there with the trainers, not necessarily sure, like you said, what that is and what the extent is. But at the same time, it's a shame nonetheless, because if he does have to miss any time or even is just, on the bike on the side, that's a shame for him because that's a lost time that all of a sudden now Greg Newsome, as he gets comfortable and as he gets used to the next level, that's more ground that he's gaining on Greedy for that starting job on the outside.
Yeah, and again, we don't know the nature of it. We don't know what it was, just that he left the field with the trainer. And for Greedy's sake, he was so excited that he was healthy. You certainly hope that he can come back and is good to go. We again will keep that in mind. All right, Nate Burleson, really talented national analyst from Good Morning Football on NFL Network, had this to say about the Browns' pass rushing duo of Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney.
We don't truly appreciate what Myles Garrett did last year, along with Olivier Vernon, who tore his Achilles towards the end of the season. But they add in Jadeveon Clowney. Now you got two guys who went #1 overall with high promise. Myles Garrett, I think he's fulfilled expectations a little bit more than Jadeveon. Jadeveon, at times, would have good seasons, but the numbers didn't back it up. I'm not saying that he doesn't make an impact on every play, but Myles Garrett is absolute Destructicon, and he'll pad the stat sheet. So for me, having these guys together, and maybe Jadeveon Clowney being motivated by young Myles Garrett, this can up his game. Guys that can easily get in double-digit sacks. I see these guys 22, maybe 25 sacks this year if they're both healthy because they have a dominant defense and linebackers and DBs that can also help with the quarterback holding the ball, which every D lineman loves that.
And, Mac, that's a former wide receiver, Nate Burleson, saying 22, 23 sacks. If they have that many sacks, it will be a fun fall at First Energy Stadium for Browns fans.
Definitely. And I would say this, between those two, Myles, he was really on track, early on in the season. He was causing a lot of those forced fumbles. He was getting to the quarterback. And then once he got COVID, after that, it didn't really seem like he was quite the same. He was still Myles Garrett. He's still extremely disruptive. But, he was on such a tear early on in that season. I'm looking forward to see what he's able to bring. And because, like he mentioned too, Jadeveon Clowney, if he's able to be motivated, if he stays on the field, we saw what Olivier Vernon was able to do, with Myles Garrett on the field and off the field. I think if Jadeveon Clowney is able to stick on the field this year, these two, they can get up there around that 25 sack number. I really think that's feasible because I can see Myles getting upward of 15 or 16 sacks. To the point where, honestly, I think he's pushing towards that 20 sack mark. I think with the way that he was able to succeed this past year, especially adding in the extra game. So I think that Myles Garrett can push towards that. And I think because of that, you're going to have, Jadeveon Clowney in those mismatches, maybe against one of the weaker tackles on the other side. I think all of a sudden now, he could be right. That could be the best pass rush duo in the NFL.
Yeah, I would agree. And they're very similar in terms of athleticism, which is kind of unique. All right, so Myles Garrett was asked about how long it would take the Browns defense to gel. So many new guys and fitting everybody in, and the question is, are the Browns going to be ready, and is it going to be easy for them to gel? Here's Myles Garrett.
I don't like to think about that, knowing that we got the Chiefs the first week. So we don't have time to kind of be on the back foot, going against them first week. But I know out here is where we're going to be able to kind of grind those things out, sharpen the spear, as we say, and make sure that we're ready come week 1.
I know you don't want to rush it, but is there a way to kind of accelerate it a little bit, or do you feel like what you guys got done in minicamp is giving you a good foot forward as far as that goes?
Minicamp definitely was a good foot forward, getting all the playbook in during that short period. But we have 4 or 5 weeks, to ourselves right now, to where we can get all our guys lined up and looking at everything, going through it full speed, pads on, and asking as many questions as you need. And we got some older guys who have some experience, knowing that we can stay out here with them and they can help lead, just like some of the younger guys can do as well.
And again, he kind of brought in Kansas City, and there's a little bit of an advantage to the offenses not knowing what the Browns scheme is going to look like as well. So there is an advantage to having a different feel as well. But I get Miles's point.
Yeah, and that's the one that I've actually really been focused on, especially because of the different pieces that are all coming in. You've got a lot of different faces coming in, possibly 9 new starters going into the season. So because of that, it is going to take a little bit of time. But like what Miles said, that's what I want to hear out of Myles Garrett. Especially, you got the Chiefs week 1. It's not like you can sleep on anybody, starting out your season when you're going up against the reigning AFC champions. So, and especially in offense with Pat Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and company. So, I look at this test, and it's going to be interesting to see where they're at. And I look at that as a barometer because in those following weeks, you've got the Bears, you've got the Texans in week 2, especially for that home opener. So you're going to have a little bit of time to kind of get your feet underneath you. But like what he said, getting minicamp out of the way, getting, all these guys in, it'll be kind of a feeling out process of figuring out, okay, how does Jadeveon like to rush? How does, Jordan Elliott like to come in the middle, at least when it comes to his pass rushing ability. And figuring out, where people like to play, how they like to rush the passer, and figuring out, where everybody's comfortable in that sense. So, I look at this as, it's going to have to be a rapid adjustment, but, that's going to be the storyline that I'm following along most. How long does it take this defense to gel together? Because the sooner that they do, the better for this team's success in the long run.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. When we return, 5 reasons to be excited about training camp and how Jarvis Landry sees this offense evolving in year 2. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns with Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. So, Mac, BrownsWire.com has 5 reasons to be excited about training camp. First one we're going to hit on, continuity, and I think this is a big one.
Yeah, and that's the biggest storyline because this is the first time that I can remember, obviously, having some good continuity, and at least the first time in Baker Mayfield's career actually having the same coaching staff together and sticking together, from year to year. So I'm genuinely curious to see how this offense is able to evolve because, like we mentioned, this is one of those times where you got the basics out of the way last year. Now you can start to get into the advanced concepts in this playbook. So I'm interested to see how they're able to build upon that success with that continuity with the coaching staff going into year 2.
So the next part of this is Baker Mayfield's development. And again, it kind of plays into the continuity. It's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, it's funny how, keeping the same coaching staff and actually having the same playbook works out well in Baker's development. I know it's a shock for people in Cleveland, but yeah, that's going to be the next big step for these guys is going to be seeing how Baker's able to take that to the next level because, like I said, you got the same coaching staff, comparatively, and I know you've mentioned this here in the recent weeks too, but Lamar Jackson's had the same coaching staff, had the same offensive coordinator. You've had the same thing with Josh Allen and company in Buffalo. Baker Mayfield, this is his first time being able to, build upon his strengths going into year 2 of an offense and of a coaching staff. So I'm interested to see how they're able to, accentuate Baker's strengths and really go from there in year 2 with him underneath this coaching staff and in this system.
So number 3, we've kind of already addressed defensive additions. We talked about that last segment. The next is depth, projecting, and protecting the rookies. And I think that's kind of key. A rookie's going to have to earn their playing time on this roster.
Yeah, and it's funny to kind of go back to the old days of these guys are going to have to play from day one and they're going to have to make an immediate impact. All of a sudden now you have guys like Anthony Schwartz who can actually take their time. And I know it's a novel concept as well, but again, these guys have talent, but it's about developing the nuance of the position. You saw that last year with Donovan Peoples-Jones where, he didn't necessarily make as much of an impact early on in the season, but then once you saw in the Bengals game and then as the season went on against the Titans as well, he's able to, pick his spots and really be able to make an impact in little spurts, but he doesn't have to be a major impact guy from day one. And even a guy like Greg Newsome, like we talked about, he's somebody who most years he would have to be relied upon as that starter. And even that's what we saw from Greedy Williams in 2019, where, he pretty much had to be that outside corner until Terrence Mitchell ended up having to take over for him due to injury as well. But, those expectations for a Greg Newsome who fell to the Browns at 26, those expectations aren't there. He can just sit back and learn. He can be a sponge with these guys. And I think that's going to be a great benefit to a lot of these rookies going into year 1, taking on a lot of those, learning experiences and the nuances of their own position. And they can really develop, take their time. They don't have to be that impact guy from day one.
And the final one, weapons. And you could say that on both sides of the ball. The Browns have a number of guys who figure to be playmakers.
Yeah, and again, it's such a great feeling from where we were in 2017 to where we are here in 2021. Gone are the days of the Dwayne Bowes and company, but now, you mentioned, we've talked about Odell, we've talked about Jarvis, I mentioned Donovan Peoples-Jones and Schwartz. You've got Hollywood Higgins as well, and even Austin Hooper and so many different players on offense, and even Demetric Felton is somebody who can play as a running back or a receiver. There's plenty of options on offense. And like you said, on defense too, different linebackers that can play, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, he was somebody who was mentioned as a possible safety. I don't think that's necessarily the best role for him there, but he can at least have the athletic ability to possibly play back a little bit and really adds that added versatility for Joe Woods and company on defense. So I'm really interested to see how they're able to play and how they play off each other. There's a lot of versatility, and I know that's going to be the buzzword from Kevin Stefanski coming this year. But, that's something that I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how they're able to implement and expand both on offense and defense with these guys.
So the thought of the offense evolving in year 2, second year, you would expect that. Here's what Jarvis Landry said about how this year's offense can evolve from a year ago.
Just keep understanding who we are in our identity and how we're trying to get better. And obviously, again, it starts here in training camp. But we took an evaluation about how we did last year. Whether it was penalties, whether it was turnovers. Those are things that we can try to eliminate and take those numbers down a little bit, and it gives us better chances to win some of the games that we may not have.
And again, this offense will evolve. Kevin Stefanski did talk about that. You can't do the same thing year to year because the defenses will react to it.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I think you saw as the season went on. A lot of people hammer home about, running the ball. But what you actually saw as the season went on was that you saw the passing game setting up the run game a lot towards the end of the year. And that's where you saw Baker Mayfield able to help set up, especially in that Titans game where he's able to complete a lot of those passes. And really that's where you're going to see the offense go, I feel, is that you're going to see more of the passing game early on to help open up the offense for Nick Chubb to, be able to hit those holes running at that point. And then you're able to get Kareem Hunt in the passing game and it expands so much more of this offense and really is able to expand new opportunities for these guys and really be able to kind of delve into a lot of these different aspects of the offense that you really didn't get a chance to see as much just because they were going through the basic part of the playbook last year. Now they get to expand, they get to mix up, and I mean, hell, you might even get to see more Odell to Jarvis passes this year instead.
So ESPN.com has come up with the biggest training camp questions for each and every team for the Browns. Will Baker Mayfield make another leap last year beyond last year's bounce-back year?
I'm going to say yes. And I think that, again, it ties into continuity, and it ties into, keeping that same offensive coaching staff from one year to the next for Baker Mayfield. And I think that he will. I think that you saw as he got more and more comfortable in this system by the end of the year last year, you obviously saw that, the fruits were bearing there towards the end of the year for the offense. And you saw it in the Steelers game, especially. You saw it in the Kansas City game, I feel, as the game kind of evolved and went on. And as he got more and more comfortable. But on top of that, too, I think that Baker Mayfield, as he gets more comfortable, you're going to see him have more responsibilities. And I think that he's going to really relish, in that responsibility for the offense. And overall, I think that he will be able to take that next step with this team. And I do envision that, this offense as a whole, I think that Baker Mayfield will be leading that charge. And it's not just going to be a run game anymore. I think you're going to see more of a balance between the two in this season.
Yeah, and so the question is Baker Mayfield motivated? He answered that question on his Instagram account. Take a look at what he posted. Had to put the time in and let him know what time it is. Year 4 incoming for this small, incapable walk-on. So Baker Mayfield, again, taking notice of those who have doubted him, I'm certain, and if that's what motivates him, he knows what motivates him best.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. We haven't seen it as much out of Baker, but I'm kind of glad that we're seeing it sprinkled in a little bit. I don't want it to be completely taken away because, again, that's what makes 6-6 at this point. Baker is somebody who thrives off of, that talk and everything like that. So, I look at what Baker's able to do and the way that he's able to kind of bring along, that hate that a lot of different people have thrown his way. And maybe not necessarily hate, but even just a little bit of doubt, going into year 4 for him. I do think that he's going to take that next step. He's going to take a leap. And, I'm really looking forward to seeing how he's able to take that next step, because I do think that it's going to be a big step this year for him and for this offense. I just want to see where he's able to go, because to be quite honest, I'm not necessarily sure if everybody's ready for him to go ahead and take that next step.
Mac Robinson and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear Kevin Stefanski and what he's thinking about Joe Woods' defense. Sports4CLE, will be right back. Stay with us. Sports4CLE continues. Browns training camp underway out in Berea. Kevin Stefanski talked about what this new look defense with Joe Woods back as the defensive coordinator will look like in 2021.
Yeah, I think our coaches understand that we're introducing some new guys in the scheme. Now we have a bunch of guys that are returning as well. So it's not like you're starting with an entire defensive new scheme like we were last year, like we were on offense and defense. So I think the guys have a plan. I think really speaks to how you plan your practices, how you do your installs, how you make sure you don't go too fast, too quickly. And I think Joe and the staff are on top of that.
So I wanted to ask you about Joe Woods. I mean, what stood out to you about him last year as he was going through that season? And I mean, where does the confidence come from that he can kind of turn this defense around?
Yeah, Joe's a really good football coach. I believe in that staff. I think they did a nice job last season in some tough spots. So they've worked really hard this offseason, fine-tuning the scheme. As we mentioned, we're adding some new players in there, so I think Joe's as excited as anybody to get out here.
Did you learn anything new about him, kind of working so closely with him every day?
You know, having spent time with Joe years ago, he's a grinder. He stays in this office. He's in early, stays late. That light's always on in there, and he's working at it. So something I knew, but having an office right next to him, maybe I got a front row seat at it.
And Mac, when you think about Joe Woods and that defense, it was banged up. It was undermanned a season ago, and you know, a lot more should be expected of him because the Browns have given him the pieces to be successful now.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I thought when everybody was really criticizing Joe Woods towards the end of the year. You know, all I thought was that, you know, he doesn't necessarily have the tools to run the defense that he wants. You know, when he initially came into Cleveland, you know, as we've mentioned plenty of times, you know, he really wanted to run that dime defense, especially. And again, for those who don't know, that's running 6 defensive backs, 4 defensive linemen, and then that 1 linebacker position who can go ahead and cover just about what you need. So, you know, I look at what he has now at this point, and I really do feel like not only does he have all the tools in the toolbox, it's almost like instead of getting that 16-box crayon set, you know, instead you got the 64-box. Now you could go ahead, you get all the different colors that you want to play with at that point. You can get really more in depth, and you can get really more, you can really expand upon all of that. So I really do think that, you know, for him, he's got all the tools that he needs. And at this point, he can go above and beyond. He has a ton of versatile players. You mentioned Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Troy Hill can play inside or out. Same thing with Greg Newsome, and he mentioned that earlier today as well. You know, I think that a lot of these players can play inside and out, and it gives him a lot of versatility and a lot of different looks that he can give, a lot of different disguises, and a lot of just different options that, quite frankly, not many teams, Cleveland or otherwise, have had in the past.
So another topic of discussion is who's going to be a leader for the Browns this year. And Myles Garrett was asked, did he feel it was important, you know, now that he's kind of the face of that defense, the cornerstone of the defense that they're building around? Did he feel it was important that he was a leader this year?
I think so, but I've always thought, you know, everybody has a chance to lead. You know, just you have to find your moment. And so, you know, once you're older, you know, those moments come a little bit more than, you know, when you're a young guy. But you just have to, you know, pick the time and place where, you know, those guys are, you know, they need a little, you know, voice in their ear to keep them going or to go a little bit harder.
Are you paying attention to, you know, what your new teammates are like and how to bring out the best in some of the key guys who are going to be on D with you?
I feel like, you know, it's got to match your intensity. You know, when I come out here, I can be laid back, but I know when, you know, we need to go, I can pick it up at any time. So I want them to be able to match that. And so I only know the way I can do it, and I'm not going to do it any other way. I'm not going to do something that's foreign to me.
And Mac, again, Myles Garrett is kind of developing into that defensive player of the year type of player, and those guys are usually leaders.
Yeah, and especially, too, you know, for Myles, originally coming in, you know, he was one of those quiet players, and now it really seems like he's finding his voice and finding his leadership style at this point, you know, and it's really great to see kind of just evolving. Like we talked about the evolution of the team, but, you know, again, you kind of lose track, especially, you know, this is now year 5 now for Myles, excuse me. And, you know, he's starting to develop into that veteran presence that, you know, these younger players can rely on. And, you know, you have these young guys who are coming in. They, like he said, you need to have that voice and really be that somebody that they can rely on at that point. And especially, too, you know, you want to see that out of your best players. You know, you have those guys who are good locker room guys. But, you know, again, if the top guys on your team are those guys that are giving you the most effort and are really at the forefront for this team, I think that, you know, that's huge especially to see from a guy like Myles Garrett putting in that work and putting in, the effort to, make sure that everybody's, getting along and making sure that everybody's up to speed at that point. I really do think that, this is a great sign for Myles going forward.
The interesting thing is everybody expects the Browns to be a really good team. The roster is kind of loaded. The Browns say they need to work. So it's kind of interesting to figure out just how good some of the players think this team is relative to what they've played on before. That was kind of the scene posed to Jarvis Landry.
Is this the most talented team you've been on?
Yeah, this is.
What's it like when you look over and see all those new? I know you're not going to face them in practice, but those new additions on defense and the upgrades on that side of the ball. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it looks amazing, and we get the opportunity to compete against each other. I think that's, when you bring in guys of the caliber of guys that we brought in, the competition level raises to another notch, and that's something that's definitely important when you're trying to go from good to great.
Hey, along those lines, we're talking to Greg Newsome here in a little bit. How much is that going to help him to go against you and Odell, Rashard, just go against all these guys you have?
Yeah, I mean, listen, again, when you got highly competitive guys in the building, the type of, I watch these guys highlight tapes and their draft tapes and stuff like that a little bit when they're coming out. So, like, the mentality of those guys, and that increases the competitive nature in everyone that's on the field, So I think that's an important thing to have inside of a team.
Mac, that's another thing that has been pretty consistent. Kevin Stefanski says competition is good. The players are starting to say competition is good. It makes sense.
Yeah, and that's been the one thing that I feel like has kind of been lacking, at least prior to bringing in Jarvis Landry. Seeing Landry come in and, he was one of those first players that was really that highly competitive type of player. And obviously you saw that in the Hard Knocks, speech that he gave too back then. But at the same time, now you're seeing the rest of that roster being developed, and you can see the rest of these players getting added in, and they add in more and more and more until the point now where the whole roster really is thriving off of that competition and is really growing together at that point. So for me, I think that it really just breeds more and more growth, at least from this team, and really seeing how this team has progressed from year to year to year. I am thrilled with where this team is at and the players that Andrew Berry has brought in. I mean, honestly, done a phenomenal job, not only bringing in talented players, but bringing in the right players, at least not only from an on-field standpoint, but also from a locker room standpoint. Because you look at guys like Anthony Walker as well, and these guys, they're great leaders, but on top of that, they put in the work on top of that. So I look forward to seeing how these young players are able to grow and are able to play off of these veterans that they have brought in and have on this roster.
Yeah, right now it seems like it all fits. Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. As always, Mac, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Of course, Dave. Always happy to hop on with you guys.
All right, Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We're going to continue talking Browns. Kevan Arnold will join us, and we're going to hear from Joe Hayden about the Browns-Steelers rivalry. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Training camp is underway for the Browns. We continue talking Browns football here on Sports4CLE. Joe Hayden is a guy who is uniquely qualified to talk about the Browns-Steelers rivalry. Played for the Browns, played for the Steelers. Here's what he had to say about that rivalry on Good Morning Football on the NFL Network.
It's so great to me because I think it starts with the fans. Both the cities, man, have amazing fans. They love this. They love the team so much. I mean, the biggest thing is football in Cleveland, is football in Pittsburgh. Diehard fans. Then it's the teams, man. You know, with Pittsburgh, it's been a lot of winning. So the fans really expect a lot. In Cleveland, you know, haven't really won as much, but the fans have never wavered. They're there for their city. And I think that their team's getting a whole lot better now. You know, just consistency in the front office. But in Pittsburgh, it's just they have only had 3 coaches the last 50 years. You know your general manager, you know your position coaches. I think there's just been a lot more turnaround. But it's just, for me, the thing that makes the rivalry so big is they're so close. It's an hour-and-a-half drive. And then the fan bases are basically the same type of fan bases. They love their city to death. And football is the biggest thing in Cleveland and Pittsburgh.
Let's bring in Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. Kevin, you hear Joe Hayden, and Joe Hayden understands that rivalry. And, you know, I think there were 50 days where the Browns had 3 head coaches as opposed to the 50 years for the Steelers at some time. But I just, in listening to Joe Hayden, I'm like, boy, this guy gets both cities.
He does. And he was here for so long and knows that the fans, how loyal Cleveland fans are. I mean, in reality, this shouldn't be a rivalry, or it shouldn't be as well known of how deep this rivalry goes for even people like in my generation, because all we've known is poor football in this town with the Cleveland Browns. But it is the fans and it's our families who have brought us up and told us and shown us the history of this rivalry, why we utterly dislike the Pittsburgh Steelers. While, of course, you respect what they've been able to do as an organization, we want it to be that way, you still dislike the Pittsburgh Steelers. It starts there, both fan bases understanding the magnitude of the rivalry and the history of it, and, of course, getting the next generations involved in it, and it just translates onto the field and vice versa. Now that both teams are competing for the AFC North, you really feel that energy back and forth between the field and the stands and back. And now that all the fans can be in these stadiums, you're really going to feel what this rivalry is supposed to be, hopefully, here in 2021.
Yeah, and, you know, I'm old school enough that it's concerning that the Steelers appear to be down. You never quite count out the Pittsburgh Steelers because of that stability and the continuity of coaching, and it's a really good franchise. All right. I don't want to say that too loud. So Jarvis Landry spoke on the topic of going from good to great. So the Browns, they went from okay to pretty good last year. Now they're trying to go from pretty good to great. Landry spoke on how difficult that is, and is it more difficult than going from mediocre to good?
I think it's all hard, you know. It's all hard. It's always kind of hard to take those next steps, you know. And but I think we got the group of guys that's going to challenge each other, that have the work ethic, that want to be great, you know, and want to go to another level. So I think that's something that our team has, but it's definitely hard. It's hard.
Aside from getting to the regular season with everybody healthy and ready to go, what's probably the most important thing that you guys need to accomplish over these next 6-7 weeks here?
Yeah, man, just, you know, playing smart football, you know, practicing the right way, you know, continue to work on the things that we're good at, continue to evolve, continue to develop, you know, and like the first question, like the second question, just, you know, try to take the next step. I think that's what's in it for us.
Kevin, the thing I absolutely love is he said there's a bunch of people that want to go from good to great. That's usually the first step in getting there.
The first step, you got to have the want and the will to go from good to great. Then you got to have the work ethic and actually show the work ethic. And we're all going to hear from all these players throughout these next few weeks of training camp and even into the season. They're going to say all the right things, and that's just kind of the culture that's been built. but now you have the confidence that they can back up what they're saying. In the past, we've been kind of given that player speak, that coach speak, those cliches that never translated on the field. They never actually showed that they believed what they were saying and what they were telling us in the media. This team, Coach Stefanski, the culture that they have established shows that they can go out and back it up. And they're going to look at one word in that building all over the place. And I know the players mentioned it today as well. The word is work. If you want to go from okay to good, you got to work. You want to go from good to great, you got to put the work in. If you want to go from great to legendary, you have to put the work in and be willing to make certain sacrifices as a unit to accomplish the ultimate goal that every single team with 32 training camps opening up are all setting out for at the start of the 2021 NFL season.
You know, it's kind of interesting. We can say that word Super Bowl in Cleveland and actually not blush or I mean, there's, you know, it could happen for the first time in quite a while.
Yeah, it's going to come down to what these players really want to do, because Miles talked about it too. They look great on paper, but it doesn't matter if you don't work in practice, work in training camp, and find a way to come together and actually be about it. You can't just talk about it. You got to be about it. This team will, and how far that takes them will be up to them and this coaching staff.
So it's pretty obvious. The defense has kind of upgraded its speed and quickness. Myles Garrett was asked about that, you know, the upgrade to the defense's speed and quickness.
You don't want to compromise strength for a lighter, faster, quicker. You know, got to have a little bit of both, and I think we do right now. I'm liking the additions we have. You know, I miss the guys that we lost. You know, there's some great guys, some great teammates. I'm happy for them and the teams they've been picked up with. But I think the guys we have now are, you know, great professionals. They have the talent that we need, and I think we can do well, you know, as long as they stay in the books and they keep on doing what they're doing.
Kevin, it's kind of interesting that, you know, he took it there from a faster defense.
Yeah, and this defense looks so good and so like so many guys that can make plays. And I know Mac talked about it too, what Joe Woods is going to want to do with some of that speed, but also leadership and work ethic type guys that are going to be out there on the field. In a pass-happy league, you gotta be fast and you gotta be quick to the ball, and you gotta have to make sure that the offense feels your presence out there. You can't just have the speed and run around the field and not hit anybody. You gotta make sure that you have the speed, but you get physical when it's time to get physical, and not allow offenses to set the tone of every single game that goes out there in this 17-game season.
Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we will talk, again, Myles Garrett and possibly the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. Also, Jarvis Landry's health. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. Sports4CLE continues. Browns training camp underway out in Berea. Myles Garrett was asked about being the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year in some odds makers' books. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We got a lot of guys who can when they have the ability and the talent, and so I'll be competing against them. But you know, most of them I'm just trying to help my team win. And so whatever they ask me to do, they call for me to do, I'm going to do that. And make the plays that I'm supposed to make. I'm not going to do anything out of the ordinary because, you know, I can only do what comes to me. I can't make plays, you know, 30 yards downfield. I can only do what's asked of me.
And Kevin, again, that's the right mindset. You're hearing all the right things, I think, from the Browns.
Yeah, we just talked about it before the break, Dave. We're hearing all the right things. Myles Garrett, of course, he wants to win Defensive Player of the Year. That's something that he's set out to do. And of course, last year he looked like he was on track, and COVID got in the way, as it did with many other things, and nothing seemed normal last year. But Myles is trying to take that next step as a leader, and not just a leader by example on the field, a leader vocally for this team as well. And you and I have talked about that 3rd and 14 play ad nauseum against Kansas City and how there could have been that vocal leader, and maybe that was the piece that was missing after that Myles Garrett sack. Well, Myles Garrett is trying to not just have the physical presence on the field, but also the vocal presence for his teammates and put the work in. And if the team has success, people will recognize, and the individual success will follow.
All right, so another area of topic, Jarvis Landry, kind of beat up all last year. He pointed out he was never really able to train in the offseason. He went right from rehabbing his injury into kind of training camp, so he never really got the opportunity to get his body kind of feeling the way he wanted to. A little different this year. Take a listen to Jarvis Landry.
It was challenging. It was challenging, and there was a lot of things going on in my head that I might have not showed on the field or, you know, in these environments. But I had the right people around me. You know, everybody in the training room was supportive. You know, they were here to make sure that I was getting the right moderate, whether I was watching my practicing or making sure I was getting the things that I needed in the training room. But it still was tough because I knew I wasn't where I needed to be. But, you know, I wanted to be there for the guys. You know, it was important that I kind of kept not missing a game, you know, and
would you say it was your toughest year?
Yeah, for sure. I think the second half of the season I began to feel better the further I got away from surgery. I think that helped me with the confidence standpoint of being able to really stick my foot in the ground, be able to change directions like I want to. But definitely the first half of the season, it definitely played a major part in me and going out there and playing.
And the other part of that, Kevin, is he says he feels great, feels as good as he has. Lost a little weight because he did a lot of strength and speed training. So Jarvis Landry looks pretty good as well.
He does look good. That's important to have your number 2 wide receiver. But since this whole revamping of this culture, him starting it, or arguably starting it back in 2018 with his leadership and what he was able to bring from that standpoint to this organization, him being out there on the field last year, more thinking about rehabbing injuries and trying to do as much as he could throughout the week and managing all of the pain and still being a part of the game plan and going out there for his team. Now he can just focus on being the Jarvis Landry that we knew we were getting from Miami and the Jarvis Landry that we have seen. I know that in his eyes, he probably isn't necessarily ecstatic with how his season went last year, what it looked like stat-wise, and how he knows he can help this team even more offensively. But him, OBJ looking good, and that whole wide receiving core, the more guys that are healthy and ready and raring to go and are just focused on what playbook elements they're going through and what they're adding to this offense this year, man, that makes them so much more dangerous. And that's why so many fans are so excited. Of course, we have to temper expectations as much as possible, but you have to be at least confident that this team is going to look even better this year than last year. And that is a huge piece to what the Browns can accomplish this year.
Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. Kevin, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Of course, Dave, thank you so much for having me on every single time.
All right, Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. That'll do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. Before we go, Indians, a 7-2 winner. Franmil Reyes hit 2 home runs. Jose Ramirez, Cesar Hernandez also hit home runs. Zach Plesac went 5 innings to get the win. Scheduled guests tomorrow, the D-Man, Dennis Maniloff, and Ellis Williams, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. We will see you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody.